6 months after humanity rejoined the galactic stage, the combined coalition fleet gathered at the edge of Rexathi home space. Over 3,000 vessels from dozens of species formed the largest armada the galaxy had ever seen, and at its head flew the human vanguard. 200 ships that had become the terror of the Dominion Commander Park stood on the bridge of the Unconquered Dawn and studied the tactical display. Dominar Prime, the Rexathi homeworld, lay before them. It was heavily defended, with orbital fortresses, weapons platforms, and nearly 1,000 warships protecting the seat of the Dominion's power. All fleet elements report ready. Their tactical officer announced, "Very well. Begin final approach. Human vessels will lead the assault." The Rexathi had prepared for this moment. They had fortified their defenses, concentrated their remaining forces, and prepared to fight to the last ship rather than accept defeat. The Dominarch himself broadcast a message across all frequencies as the coalition fleet advanced. "People of the Dominion, the ancient enemy has returned." His voice boomed. "The plague species, the ones our ancestors warned us about for 1,000 generations. They refuse to die. They refuse to yield. They refuse to see reason." Commander Park smiled grimly and opened her own channel, broadcasting on the same frequencies. "You are right," she said. "We do not yield. We do not stop. We do not accept defeat when innocent lives hang in the balance. Your empire is built on the bones of people who could not fight back. We can fight back, and we will, until every chain is broken and every prisoner is free." The battle for Dominar Prime began with human ships punching through the outer defensive ring. It was the same aggressive, close-quarters fighting that had shocked the coalition in their first engagement. But now the Allied forces understood what to expect. They followed in the wake of the human assault. Exploiting the gaps created by the Vanguard's ferocity, Rexathi defenders fought desperately, knowing that failure meant the end of everything they had built. For the first time in their history, they were defending rather than conquering, and they discovered that defense did not suit their nature. Their tactics had been designed for overwhelming weaker opponents, not for standing against an enemy that matched their aggression and exceeded their determination. Hour by hour, the defensive lines crumbled. Human boarding parties captured orbital platforms and turned their weapons against Rexathi ships. Coalition vessels pushed deeper into the system, liberating industrial stations where enslaved workers had toiled for generations. The final confrontation came at the steps of the Dominarch's palace. Not in space, but on the surface of Dominar Prime itself. Human ground forces fought through the streets of the capital city, while Rexathi soldiers made their last stand around their leader's stronghold. Commander Park led the assault personally. She had promised herself that she would see this war through to its end, that she would stand in the heart of Rexathi power and witness the moment their tyranny finally broke. For Junwoo, she thought as she advanced through enemy fire, for every person who died so others could be free. The palace doors fell after 6 hours of continuous fighting. Human soldiers poured into the throne room where the Dominarch waited with his personal guard. The fighting was brief and brutal, and when it ended, the ruler of the Rexathi Dominion knelt in chains before his conquerors. "Kill me then," the Dominarch spat. "Finish what your ancestors started and wipe my people from existence." Park looked down at him with something approaching pity. "That is not why we fought this war." "Then what? You will enslave us as we enslaved others? Make us suffer as they suffered?" "We will give you a choice," Park said. "Something you never gave your victims. The Dominion is finished. Your military will be disbanded and your weapons destroyed. You will pay reparations to the species you have wronged, and you will join the coalition as a member, bound by its laws and protected by its treaties." The Dominarch stared at her in disbelief. "You offer us survival? We offer you the chance to become something better than you were. Your ancestors were not always conquerors. Once, Your people created art and music and philosophy, perhaps freed from the burden of empire. You can rediscover what you lost. Admiral Torvik, who had joined the ground assault for the final push, spoke up. This was humanity's condition for leading our forces. They refused to command a war of extermination. They insisted that we must offer terms. Even to enemies who never showed mercy themselves. Why? The Dominarch demanded, after everything we have done, why would you show compassion? Park knelt so she could look him in the eyes. Because cruelty is a choice, and we choose differently. Your empire hurt countless beings, but destroying your species would not unhurt them. It would only add more suffering to a galaxy that has already known too much. The formal surrender was signed 3 days later. The Versathi Dominion ceased to exist as a conquering power. Its military was dismantled, its conquered territories liberated, and its people given the opportunity to rebuild under coalition oversight. Many expected them to resist, to continue fighting through insurgency and sabotage. But the complete collapse of their leadership left most Versathi citizens too stunned to organize resistance. 6 months after the war's end, Inara traveled to New Sol for a memorial ceremony honoring the humans who had fallen in the conflict. Over 12,000 had died, a staggering number for a species that had lived in peace for millennia. Each name was read aloud, and each was answered with a moment of silence. Commander Park stood beside the memorial wall, tracing her brother's name with her fingers. Inara approached quietly and stood with her in silence. Your people saved us, Inara finally said. We can never repay that debt. There is no debt, Park replied. We did what we believed was right. That is its own reward. Will humans return to isolation now that the war is over? Will you disappear again? Park shook her head slowly. We tried hiding from the galaxy's problems for thousands of years. It did not make them go away. It only meant we were not there to help when help was needed. Perhaps it is time we stopped being a myth and started being neighbors. She turned to face Inara with a gentle smile. Besides, my people have discovered that we miss the rest of the galaxy. The universe is vast and full of wonders. Why experience it alone when we can share it with friends? The final scene of humanity's return played out on Thesan Prime, where a new park had been built to commemorate the Alliance. Human and Coalition children played together on the grass, their laughter carrying across the grounds. A group of young Versathi, children of diplomats assigned to the new embassy, watched nervously from the edge of the gathering. A human boy, no more than 6 years old, walked up to them and held out a ball. Do you want to play? He asked. The Versathi children hesitated, looking at each other uncertainly. Then the oldest of them, a girl with scales just beginning to darken into adult coloring, accepted the ball with trembling hands. We do not know your games, she admitted. The human boy grinned. That is okay, we can teach you. And so they played. Children of former enemies, laughing together under an alien sun. The myth had become flesh. The legend had become family somewhere, watching from the crowd. Commander Park felt tears on her cheeks, but for the first time in months, they were tears of joy. This was why humans fought. Not for glory or conquest, but for moments like this. For the chance to build something better from the ashes of something terrible. For the promise that children would play in peace while their parents told stories of the war that ended all wars. The universe had forgotten humanity once. It would not forget them again, and humanity, having remembered why they reached for the stars in the first place, would never again turn away from those who needed their help. The front line they had taken by force had become a border of friendship, and that was the greatest victory of all. The labor camp on Kethvin IV had operated for 20 years under Versathi control. Thousands of prisoners from a dozen species worked in the mines below the surface. extracting rare minerals that fueled the Dominion war machine. Guards patrolled constantly, and anyone who could not work was disposed of without ceremony. Then the sky filled with fire, and everything changed. Yanara accompanied the human ground forces that descended on the camp. She had wanted to see firsthand how humans fought when the battle was personal, when the enemy stood before them in physical form. What she witnessed would stay with her for the rest of her life. The human soldiers moved through the camp with terrifying efficiency. Their weapons were loud and brutal, designed more for psychological impact than elegant precision. Rexathi guards who had terrorized prisoners for years died screaming under the theas. Human assault, but it was what happened after the fighting that truly surprised her. A human sergeant named Kim Dong-Yoon kicked open the door to a prisoner barracks and stopped cold. Inside, huddled against the far wall, were dozens of children from various species. They were thin and dirty, and their eyes held the hollow look of those who had abandoned hope long ago. Sergeant Kim fell to his knees. Yanara watched as this hardened warrior, who had killed 6 Rexathi guards in the past hour without hesitation, began to weep at the sight of suffering children. "Get the medics," he managed to say. "Get everyone. We need blankets, food, anything you can find." Within minutes, UN soldiers who had been fighting moments ago transformed into caregivers. They wrapped trembling children in their own jackets. They shared ration packs designed for human nutrition, but still better than anything the prisoners had eaten in years. They carried those too weak to walk with gentleness that seemed impossible for hands that had just dealt death. "I do not understand," Yanara said to the sergeant as he cradled a young Dasani child in his arms. "You were so fierce in combat. How can you be so gentle now?" Kim looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "This is why we fight. Every battle, every death, every sacrifice leads to moments like this. What would be the point of winning if we lost our souls in the process?" The liberation of Kethvan IV took 3 days. UN forces cleared the entire complex, freed over 4,000 prisoners, and captured more than 200 Rexathi personnel. Those prisoners were transported to a human medical ship called the Mercy's Burden for processing. Among the captured was Sub-Commander Thresk, a Rexathi officer who had overseen the labor camp's operations for the past 5 years. He had expected torture. The Rexathi certainly tortured their prisoners, and he assumed all species shared this practice. Instead, humans treated his wounds, fed him, and placed him in a clean holding cell with adequate lighting and ventilation. When Interrogator finally came to question him, she carried no implements of pain, only a data tablet. "I am Lieutenant Chen Milan," she introduced herself. "I need to ask you some questions about Rexathi civilian populations." Thresk stared at her in confusion. "Civilian populations?" "Yes. Where are your non-military settlements? What is the population distribution across Dominion space? What resources do your civilian communities require? Why do you want to know this?" Chum looked at him with an expression he could not read. "Because when this war ends, and it will end, we need to ensure that Rexathi civilians do not starve or suffer unnecessarily. Our goal is to defeat your military, not to exterminate your species." Thresk felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had processed thousands of prisoners over his career. He had watched them beg, threaten, bargain, and eventually break. No one had ever shown mercy without expecting something in return. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. "What game is this?" "No game," Chun assured him. "We simply believe that cruelty serves no purpose. Your military attacked our allies and enslaved innocent people. That makes your military our enemy, but your children, your farmers, your workers who never chose this war, they are not our enemies." She paused, studying his face. "The Rexathi have a reputation for ruthlessness, for treating other species as resources to be exploited. But I have read your history. Your people were not always like this. Once, long ago, you built beautiful things and valued knowledge for its own sake. What happened to that civilization? Thresk did not answer, but the question haunted him long after Chun left elsewhere on the ship. Commander Park received news that she had been dreading. Her younger brother, Captain Park Junwoo, had died in a rearguard action 3 systems away. His ship had stayed behind to cover the evacuation of a hospital station, buying time with its own destruction. She read the report in her quarters, alone. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Junwoo had been 5 years younger than her. He had followed her into the military despite their parents' objections, claiming he wanted to protect people the way she did. The last time they spoke, he had joked about the commendations he would earn and the stories he would tell when the war ended. Now, there would be no more stories. No more jokes. No more family dinners when they both retired. Park allowed herself 10 minutes of grief. She wept for her brother, for the future they would never share, for all the words left unsaid. Then she wiped her eyes, straightened her uniform, and returned to the bridge. Admiral Torvik was waiting there, having arrived to discuss strategy. He noticed the redness around her eyes, but said nothing until they were alone in the conference room. "You have lost someone," he said quietly. "My brother." His ship held a line so others could escape. Torvik was silent for a long moment. "I have watched humans fight for months now. I have seen your ferocity in battle and your gentleness in peace. But I do not think I truly understood your people until this moment." "What do you mean?" "You feel everything we feel," he said. "Pain, grief, fear, love. You are not fearless automatons or relentless war machines. You are people. People who hurt and mourn and carry unbearable burdens. Yet you continue forward anyway." Park nodded slowly. "That is the human way. We acknowledge the cost. We honor the fallen. And then we keep fighting, because stopping would mean their sacrifices were for nothing." The coalition leadership formally requested that humans assume command of the combined war effort the following week. The vote was unanimous. Species, who had initially viewed human involvement with skepticism, now recognized that these strange beings from the forgotten arm of the galaxy represented their best hope for victory. Commander Park accepted the Geointeniade responsibility in a brief ceremony aboard Decent Prime Station. "We did not return to lead you," she told the assembled representatives. "We returned to stand beside you. But if you need someone to walk into the fire first, that is something humans have always done. We will carry this burden until the war is won, or until the last of us falls." Admiral Torvik watched her speak and finally understood what it meant to have legends fighting on your side. They bled, they wept, they buried their dead and mourned them truly, and then they rose again, ready to face whatever came next. That was the power of humanity. Not invincibility, but indomitability. Not the absence of pain, but the refusal to let pain have the final word. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 200 warships arranged in a pattern that suggested both discipline and aggression. Their hulls were painted dark gray with red markings that stood out like fresh wounds against the void. Yanara watched from the observation deck of the flagship, a vessel called the Unconquered Dawn. Commander Park stood beside her, calm and composed despite the magnitude of what was about to happen. "Your coalition leaders are requesting communication," a bridge officer reported. "Open the channel." Park ordered. Admiral Torvik's face appeared on the main view screen. His expression shifted from cautious hope to visible confusion as he studied the fleet behind. "Park, you brought 200 ships," he said, and Yanara could hear the disappointment he was trying to hide. "We are grateful, but the Vrexathi have thousands of vessels. I am not certain how much difference." "Admiral," Park interrupted gently, "I understand your concern, Perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than words. What is your most desperate front at this moment? Torvik hesitated before answering. The Myriad Nebula. We have a defensive line there protecting 3 inhabited worlds. The Vrexathi attack it constantly. Our forces are barely holding. How many enemy ships? 800 at last count. Several human officers exchanged glances. Some of them smiled, which struck Yanara as deeply strange given the numbers involved. Set course for the Myriad Nebula, Park commanded. Admiral Torvik, your forces should coordinate with ours, but allow us to lead the engagement. There are things we need to show both your people and the Vrexathi. The combined fleet arrived at the Myriad Nebula 12 hours later. The situation was worse than the reports had suggested. Coalition ships were scattered across the region, many of them damaged or limping toward repair stations. The Vrexathi had pushed forward aggressively and now threatened to break through the defensive line. Entirely, all human vessels. Combat Formation Alpha 7. Park announced over the fleet channel. Today we remind the Vrexathi why their ancestors learned to fear us. Yanara expected the human ships to take defensive positions, to support the existing coalition forces and help stabilize the line. Instead, the entire human fleet accelerated directly toward the heart of the Vrexathi formation. What are you doing? She demanded. You are outnumbered 4-1. You can't simply charge into watch. Park said quietly. The Vrexathi responded to the approaching humans with coordinated precision. Their ships formed attack patterns designed to surround and destroy the smaller fleet. It was standard tactics against an inferior force. And it should have worked. Then the humans reached weapons range. The first thing Yanara noticed was how close they fought. Coalition doctrine emphasized long-range engagements, keeping safe distances from enemy vessels and using superior accuracy to win battles of attrition. Humans apparently did not share this philosophy. Human ships dove into the Vrexathi formation, like predators entering a school of prey. They fired weapons at ranges that seemed suicidally close, their beams cutting through enemy shields before they could fully activate. When Vrexathi ships tried to retreat to safer distances, human vessels pursued them relentlessly, a damaged human cruiser, trailing fire and venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, accelerated directly into a Vrexathi command ship and detonated its reactor core. The explosion destroyed both vessels and damaged 3 more enemy ships nearby. Did that crew just sacrifice themselves? Yanara whispered. They were already dying, Park explained, her voice betraying no emotion. They chose to make their deaths count for something. The coalition forces watched in stunned silence as the human fleet tore through the Vrexathi with savage efficiency. Pilots ejected from crippled fighters and used maneuvering packs to approach enemy ships, attaching explosive charges to vulnerable points before being retrieved by rescue craft. Ground assault teams boarded Vrexathi vessels and fought hand-to-hand through corridors, designed for creatures twice their size. But most disturbing of all was the Vrexathi response. Their coordination collapsed almost immediately. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began scattering in different directions. Communication intercepts revealed commanders screaming contradictory orders at their subordinates. They recognize us, Park said, watching the chaos unfold. Their cultural memory has preserved the truth about what we are. Their ancestors taught them to fear the endurance species, and that fear is proving stronger than their discipline. Within 3 hours, the battle was over. Of the 800 Vrexathi ships that had threatened the Myriad Nebula, fewer than 200 escaped. The rest were destroyed, captured, or left drifting without power. Human losses were significant but sustainable. 37 ships destroyed and another 60 damaged. Admiral Torvik requested a private communication with Commander Park after the fighting ended. How? He asked, simply, I have studied military tactics my entire life. What you did today should have been impossible. Park considered her answer carefully. My people evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. Our planet had extreme temperatures, dangerous predators, toxic plants, and natural disasters that could wipe out entire populations. We survived by refusing to accept death, by fighting through pain that would incapacitate other species, by never, ever giving up. She pulled up a diagram of the human body on her display. Our biology is built for endurance. We can operate without sleep for extended periods. We recover from injuries that would be fatal to most species. Our adrenaline response allows us to ignore wounds and continue fighting long after we should have collapsed. But it is more than physical. She continued, our psychology is different. When we see suffering, we feel compelled to stop it. When we make bonds with others, we will die to protect them. We do not fight because we enjoy war, Admiral. We fight because we cannot stand to watch innocent people suffer when we have the power to help. Torvik processed this information in silence. Finally, he asked a question that had been weighing on his mind. Your tactics today were effective, but costly. You lost over 30 ships in a single engagement. Can you sustain such losses? Can you sustain losing entire star systems? Park countered. Every one of my people who died today chose to be here. They knew the risks and accepted them. That is what it means to be human. We count the cost, we mourn the loss, and then we continue forward. It is the only way we know. A junior officer approached Jinara as she watched the aftermath of the battle. His uniform was torn and stained with blood, both red and colors she did not recognize. He had clearly been part of the boarding actions. Your coalition medic saved my life, he told her. A Kovani doctor, I think. They worked on me even though the fighting was still happening around us. Said they could not just let me die. We take care of our allies, Yanara replied. The human smiled. A genuine expression of warmth. Then we will get along well. That is exactly how we think. By the end of the week, the human intervention had become the only topic of discussion across coalition space. Species that had dismissed humans as myth now watched recorded footage of the battle with disbelief. The Vrexathi had been pushed back further in one engagement than in the previous 5 years of war, and on the flagship Unconquered Dawn. Commander Park studied star maps and planned the next phase of the campaign. The coalition had asked for legends, and legends they had received. Now it was time to show them what legends could truly accomplish. Admiral Torvik stared at the holographic display floating above his command table and felt his heart sink into his stomach. The numbers were devastating. 3 more star systems had fallen to the Vrexathi Dominion in the past week alone. Millions of lives lost or enslaved. Entire civilizations reduced to ash and memory. His pale blue skin had grown even paler over the past decade of war, and the silver scales along his neck had begun to dull with stress. As the Supreme Commander of the Galactic Coalition Fleet, every death weighed upon his conscience like stones dropped into deep water. Admiral, the Council awaits your presence, his aide announced from the doorway. Torvik closed his 4 eyes briefly and gathered what remained of his composure. The War Council would want answers he did not have and solutions he could not provide. The coalition was dying, and everyone knew it. The council chamber on Thesan Prime was filled with representatives from 37 different species. Each one bore the same expression of barely concealed despair. The Vrexathi had been expanding for centuries, consuming world after world with methodical cruelty, and the coalition had been losing ground since the war began 40 years ago. We have exhausted our reserve fleets, Admiral Torvik reported, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. Our shipyards cannot replace losses fast enough. At current rates of attrition, the coalition will collapse within 5 years. Silence filled the chamber like poison gas. No one wanted to speak the truth that everyone already knew. They were losing, and there seemed to be no way to stop it. Then an ancient voice rose from the back of the room. There may be one option we have not considered. All eyes turned to Elder Corvos, the oldest member of the Corvani delegation. His species was known for their long lives and longer memories, and Corvos himself had lived for nearly 800 years. His wrinkled face and clouded eyes made him appear fragile, but his mind remained sharp as a blade. The old star charts speak of a species from the remote spiral arm. Corvos continued. They were called many names across many cultures, but the most common translation is the endurance species, or sometimes the ones who refuse to fall. A Silanite diplomat let out a dismissive hiss. You speak of myths and legends, Elder. Children's stories will not save us from the Vrexathi. Are they merely stories? Corvos asked. Every spacefaring culture in this room has some version of the same tale. A species with impossible resilience, beings who could survive conditions that would kill any other creature. Warriors who fought on even when victory seemed mathematically impossible. Does that not strike you as more than coincidence? Admiral Torvik raised a hand for silence. Even if such beings existed, they would have made contact by now. We have explored most of the galaxy. Perhaps, a young voice interjected. They did not wish to be found. Intelligence Officer Yanara stepped forward, her silver fur catching the light as she moved. She was young for her position, barely 40 years old by the Sani standards. But her analytical skills had earned her a seat at these councils. I have been studying intercepted Vrexathi communications, she explained, activating her own holographic display. For centuries, the Dominion has avoided one sector of space. They have never attempted to expand into it despite its strategic value. Their internal documents refer to it as the wound that bleeds back. The chamber grew very quiet. I do not know what that phrase means, Yunara admitted. But the Vrexathi fear something in that region. Something that hurt them badly enough that they still remember it after thousands of years. Elder Corvos nodded slowly. The legends say the endurance species fought a great war long ago, a war they won against impossible odds. Perhaps the Vrexathi remember that defeat. Admiral Torvik studied the star map. The quarantine sector sat at the edge of explored space, far from major trade routes or strategic resources. It would have been easy to overlook, easy to ignore, but desperation made him willing to consider possibilities he would have dismissed before. We will send a reconnaissance mission, he decided. A small ship, minimum crew, no military markings. If there is nothing there, we lose little. If there is something, he paused. Then perhaps we gain hope. I volunteered to lead the mission. Yanara said immediately. Several council members protested, arguing that she was too valuable to risk on such a slim chance. But Yanara stood firm. Her golden eyes blazed with determination as she addressed the assembly. I have spent my career analyzing threats from a distance, she said. Perhaps it is time I saw something with my own eyes. If there is even a small chance that these beings exist and might help us, I need to be the one to make first contact. I understand the strategic situation better than anyone else. We could send. Admiral Torvik considered her words and finally nodded. Very well. Take the scout vessel Quiet Shadow. Minimal crew, maximum stealth. Report back within one standard month regardless of what you find. 3 weeks later, Yanara guided her small ship into the quarantine sector. Her crew of 5 watched their instruments with nervous anticipation. The region appeared empty at first, just scattered stars and swirling dust clouds. Then the readings began to change. I am detecting industrial signatures, her sensor operator reported, his voice trembling. Massive ones. There are shipyards, mining operations, communication networks, he trailed off. Unable to continue, how many life signs? Yanara asked. The operator checked his readings 3 times before answering. Billions, Officer Yanara. I am detecting billions of life signs across multiple star systems. Yanara felt her heart's racing. An entire civilization had existed here in secret for untold centuries, hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The scale of it defied everything she thought she knew about explored space. "We are being hailed," her communications officer announced. "The signal is using a language pattern that matches no known species in our database." Before Yanara could respond, her view screen filled with the image of approaching vessels. They were unlike any ship she had ever seen, angular and aggressive, covered in what appeared to be layered armor plating. They moved with predatory grace through the void. "They are surrounding us," her pilot whispered. Yanara straightened in her command chair. Whatever happened next would determine the fate of the coalition, and perhaps the entire galaxy. She opened a channel and spoke the only words that seemed appropriate. "We come in peace. We come seeking help. Our people are dying, and we have nowhere else to turn." The silence stretched for an eternity. Then a response came through in heavily accented but understandable galactic common. "We know. We have been watching your war for some time. Proceed to the following coordinates. The Council of New Sol will hear your petition." Yanara looked at her crew and saw her own desperate hope reflected in their eyes. The myths were real. The legends had substance, and somewhere in this hidden corner of the galaxy, the endurance species waited to decide if they would rejoin a universe that had forgotten they ever existed. The orbital station above New Sol was the largest artificial structure Yanara had ever seen. It stretched across the void like a metal mountain range, covered in lights and surrounded by hundreds of ships moving in precise patterns. Her small vessel felt like a grain of sand approaching a beach. "They call themselves humans," a communications officer explained, having spent the journey studying the data packets their escorts had provided. Their homeworld was called Earth, but they abandoned it long ago. New Sol is the capital of their current civilization. Yanara watched the station grow larger in her view screen. 47 worlds, the briefing materials had said. 47 planets colonized and developed over thousands of years, all hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The sheer scope of their secrecy amazed her. Their escort vessels guided them to a docking bay, large enough to hold a dozen ships of similar size. As the quiet shadows settled onto the landing platform, Yanara saw figures waiting for them through the viewports. They stood on two legs with two arms, a body plan common enough across the galaxy. But something about their posture suggested coiled strength. "Are you ready?" her pilot asked. "No," Yanara admitted. "But necessity does not wait for readiness." The airlock opened, and Yanara stepped onto human territory for the first time. The air smelled different here, carrying scents she could not identify. The gravity felt slightly heavier than standard, and she understood suddenly why these beings were known for their physical endurance. A delegation waited to greet her, led by a woman in a dark uniform decorated with silver symbols. Her black hair was pulled back severely from her face, and her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much death. This was a warrior, Yanara recognized. Regardless of what title she held, "Welcome to New Sol," the woman said. "I am Fleet Commander Park Sojin. You claimed your people are dying. Explain." There was no ceremony, no diplomatic pleasantries. The humans wanted facts. Yanara respected that. "The Vrexathi Dominion has waged war against the Galactic Coalition for 40 years, Yanara began. "We are losing 3 more star systems fell last week. Billions of people have been killed or enslaved. Our military cannot match their numbers or their brutality." Commander Park listened without expression. "Continue. Our intelligence discovered that the Vrexathi have avoided this region of space for centuries. They fear something here. The legends of our oldest cultures speak of a species called the Endurance species. We came to discover if those legends were true." A faint smile crossed the commander's face. though it held no warmth. "The Vrexothi remember us. That is interesting. We thought they might have forgotten after so long. You fought them before?" "Thousands of years ago, when both our species were young to the stars," Park confirmed. "They attacked our colony worlds without warning or provocation. The war lasted 3 centuries. We won, but the cost was immense. Nearly half our population died. Entire generations knew nothing but warfare." She paused, and Yunara saw old pain in her eyes. "When it ended, our ancestors made a choice. They erased our presence from galactic records, destroyed any evidence of our existence, and retreated to this region of space. They believed isolation would protect us from future conflicts, and has it?" Yunara asked. "We have known peace for millennia," Park admitted. "But peace built on hiding while others suffer has always felt hollow to some of us." She led Yunara through the station's corridors, past bustling crowds of humans going about their daily lives. Children played in open spaces, while adults worked and talked and laughed. It looked so normal, so peaceful. The contrast with the war-torn coalition worlds seemed almost cruel. "The Human Solidarity Congress will hear your petition," Park explained. "They will decide whether we intervene in your war. I must warn you that many among us believe isolation remains our best strategy. They will argue that involving ourselves in foreign conflicts only invites future suffering." "And what do you believe, Commander?" Park stopped walking and turned to face Yunara directly. Her dark eyes searched the alien's face as though looking for something specific. "Tell me about the people the Vrexothi have conquered," she said. "What happens to them?" Yunara felt her throat tighten. "Those who resist are killed. Those who surrender are enslaved. They work in mines and factories until their bodies fail. There is no distinction made between soldiers and civilians, between adults and—" she hesitated. "And children." Something changed in Commander Park's expression. The professional mask cracked for just a moment, revealing something fierce and terrible beneath children. Park repeated softly, "They enslave children." "Yes." The commander resumed walking, but her stride had changed, become more purposeful. "A Congress meets tomorrow," she said. "I will speak in favor of intervention, but you should prepare yourself for rejection. Many of our people have grown comfortable in isolation. They may not wish to sacrifice that comfort for strangers." The next day, Yunara sat in the visitors' gallery of the Human Solidarity Congress. The chamber was filled with hundreds of representatives from across human space, all debating whether to end millennia of isolation. The arguments went back and forth for hours. Some spoke of duty and compassion, others of caution and self-preservation. Then Commander Park took the floor. "I have heard many speak today of protecting our people," she began, "of preserving the peace our ancestors bought with their blood. These are worthy concerns, but I ask you to consider what peace truly means." She paused, letting silence fill the chamber. "We built this sanctuary on the bones of those we could not save in the last war. Every day we enjoy here exists because someone sacrificed everything so we could live in safety. And what do we do with that gift? We hide. We close our eyes to the suffering beyond our borders. We tell ourselves it is not our concern." Her voice rose with controlled passion. "Right now, at this very moment, children are being torn from their families and worked to death in Vrexothi mines. Entire species are being erased from existence. And we have the power to stop it. We have ships, we have soldiers. We have the strength to make a difference." She looked across the assembly with burning intensity. "How many more bones must pile up before we have had enough? How long will we let our fear of suffering prevent us from ending the suffering of others? Our ancestors chose isolation because they were exhausted and broken. We are neither. The question before us is simple. What kind of people do we want to be?" The vote was close, closer than Yunara had dared hope. But in the end, the motion passed. Humanity would go to war once more, Commander Park found Yanara after the session ended. Prepare your ship. We leave for Coalition space within the week. 200 warships will accompany us. Only 200? Yanara asked, unable to hide her disappointment. The Vrexathi commanded thousands, Park smiled. And this time, there was genuine warmth in it. Officer Yanara, you asked for legends. You asked for the species that refuses to fall. 200 of our ships will be more than enough to show your enemies what that means. Yanara hoped she was right, because the fate of the galaxy now depended on it.